Hello, this is Jian Kim from English Composition class. Today I'll be talking about Jordan Peterson. This is the table of contents for the presentation. I'll be talking about who Jordan Peterson is, and an accusation on Jordan Peterson, and review of the literature behind this. First, so who is Jordan Peterson? I think many of you might already know him, but he's a Canadian psychology professor at University of Toronto, a clinical psychologist, a YouTuber, and an author of 3 books. He's a famous academic worth paying attention to. He was a relatively obscure professor at University of Toronto until he came to spotlight in 2017 through his public objections to Bill C-16 in Canada. Bill C-16 is a bill on gender pronoun. This law adds gender expression and gender identity as protected grounds to the Canadian Human Rights Act, and also to the criminal code provisions dealing with hate propaganda, incitement to genocide, and aggravating factors in sentencing. Basically, it requires a person to call another by the preferred gender pronoun. Peterson objected to this bill and called it a compelled speech. He also raised objections to the political correctness in general. He was criticized, called a Nazi, and nearly lost his job as a professor. Despite being controversial in political sphere, his words are usually not political. He usually talks about the meaning of life and responsibility the people have to carry. His books are usually about these words, and his book sold over 5 million copies. He gained 3.7 million subscribers, and his world tour for his book were sold out. It is interesting to see how polarized responses are to Jordan Peterson. The top are the titles of the articles that are critical about Jordan Peterson. He's often described as a dangerous figure, a sexist, a racist, and an ultra-political figure. On the contrary, his fans buy his books, go on his tour, and write articles about how the left is getting things wrong about Jordan Peterson. There are many accusations on Jordan Peterson. One major accusation is whether Jordan Peterson is a sexist or not. A sexist is characterized by or showing prejudice, stereotyping, or discrimination, typically against women on the basis of sex. A sexist is a person with sexist views. Critics claim that he is a sexist because he rationalizes the gender inequality, because he encourages men to keep dominating the society, because he discourages women from achieving something greater or climbing up the ladder. It is true that Peterson believed that the portrayal of the Western society as a patriarchal tyranny is pathological and outright wrong. Patriarchal tyranny, in case you're wondering, is a tyrannical society run by men who dominates women. At the core of this controversy is the gender pay gap. Women typically earn less than men. In the United States, women earn 82 cents for every dollar a man earns. Critics of Peterson claim that this is a sign of the patriarchal tyranny, and that gender pay gap can solely be explained in terms of gender. People like Peterson argue that there are multiple factors that attribute to this gender pay gap. For instance, men and women are different, biologically and psychologically. Men are more interested in things, while women are more interested in people. Men are more disagreeable, while women are more neurotic. And many other factors like these attribute to the gender pay gap. Peterson refers to psychological papers on the Scandinavian societies. These societies are known to be the most gender equal. Given equal choices, men and women will either make same choices or different choices. Critics of Peterson argue that they will make the same choices because they're inherently the same. To their surprise, the result was the opposite. In the most gender equal societies in the world, the gender differences were greater in their psychological traits and their career paths. Critics claim that Peterson's arguments on psychology is pseudoscience, and that rationalizing this gap is a sexist offense. Kate Mann argued that there is no truly gender equal society. Scandinavian countries, although they're the most gender equal societies in the world, they still have the patriarchal norms. Thus, there is no viable control group for this research. Supporters argue that it is actually a valid science. It has been replicated cross-culturally across ages many times. They argue that critics are framing Peterson's arguments in offensive ways. They also argue that interpreting Peterson through political lens doesn't get them to the core of his arguments, because his arguments are not political. Supporters of Peterson lament how the critics only talk about the political aspects of his words. They only look at Peterson through the political lens. It is true that the viral videos of him destroying leftist foes are quite entertaining. However, they are misleading that it leads people to believe that Peterson's appeal at the core is about attacking the political correctness. That is simply not the truth. His core lies within the meaning of life and responsibility. Supporters of Peterson criticize the criticisms of Peterson for being too lazy and misunderstanding the core of his arguments. In sum, the current literature does not have productive conversations on the idea of gender equality. Currently, it is only about framing Peterson and exposing the framing on Peterson. It doesn't get to the core of his arguments. I believe that people are so nervous about being politically correct that they avoid having any productive conversations because they fear the criticisms. When an argument made by a psychology professor on matters of psychology was cynically dismissed, I could not help but question whether there was a space for open conversation in gender inequality. I believe skepticism can be a virtue. However, it can easily lead to the trap of narrow-sightedness. I hope the literature behind Peterson becomes more open about discussing sensitive issues such as gender inequality. Thank you very much.